Welcome to Conscious Conversations, a place where East meets West, a place where conversations and ideas will challenge your minds, expand your consciousness, awaken your heart, and make you think more deeply about yourself and the world.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Conscious Conversations. I'm Anthony Profeta, and I'm here with the very sharp-looking Wes Gordon today. How are you doing today, Wes?
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Looking good.
Hey,
I like the tie, like the suit you got on today.
Yeah,
very sharp, very sharp. How was your Thanksgiving?
great, wonderful.
Good. And we just want to say to all the listeners and those of you that are watching and viewing that we are always very grateful to all of you. We're thankful for you for watching and listening. We're grateful for any comments you share with us. And we're very grateful for you sharing our program with any of your friends and family members too. So thank you all very much. I had a very interesting sort of 2-week break. So this feels like it's been a while since we've been together, but I was out west, and I just want to share that there's so much beauty in our country that we might take for granted. I was out in Arizona and Utah on a sort of retreat with 2 very dear friends, and I got to see some of the most beautiful places that I've ever seen before, like Bryce Canyon, the Grand Canyon, and Zion. Got very close to nature, and the Italian poet Dante, whose name has come up quite a few times in our show, he said that nature is the artwork of God.
Yes.
And that part of our country really shows that to me. And so it was really nice to just refresh myself and sort of get in touch with that again. And if anyone hasn't been out there, I highly suggest you put it on your bucket list because it is an exquisite part of our country. And since a lot of international travel might not be in the plans,
right,
we can travel at least still here and see the beauty that we do have in our own country.
Yeah.
But today we're going to talk a little bit about a very big topic that might take actually many shows to actually talk about all different aspects of it. But we're going to talk about something that is my favorite topic, and that is love.
Love. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. There are many different meanings to this word, but one thing that I always think back upon is that the first time I ever met my dearest teacher and mentor, Jack Kornfield, the very first time we sat together, he said something to me, which was that the purpose of our meditation and the purpose of our spiritual practice is not to perfect ourselves, but to perfect our love. And I thought that was pretty profound, because many people do get into spiritual practices, do get into meditations and all these different techniques, thinking that they need to perfect themselves and become a better person. And to put a little bit of a flip on that and say, no, it's not really about you.
Right.
It's really about love, I found very powerful. And the truth is that this idea of the perfection of our love is really the great message and the great teaching of every wisdom figure, enlightened being, and teacher of every faith and tradition around the world. Most are probably familiar with Jesus, who said that, or right before his crucifixion, he said that the only commandment he was leaving was to love one another. But he does, if you go back and read his teachings and messages, he does add a little bit to that love one another, because he says, don't only love those who love you, just don't only love your friends and your family, right, but also love your enemies.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so that, I believe, is his call for us to perfect our love. But Buddha said that to radiate boundless or limitless love towards all beings, which again is asking us to not just pick and choose, but try to cultivate a love that is given to all. And the Sufi mystic Rumi, he said that you have more love in you than you could ever imagine. And he says, connect with that and share that with all. And so those are just the 3 great, more Western religions, well, also the Eastern religion as well with Buddhism. But even in Hinduism, there are many teachers such as Sai Baba and Neem Karoli Baba, whose message was love all, serve all. In fact, for a little bit of jeopardy and trivia for those of you listening out there who might not know this, if any of you are fans of the Hard Rock, like the Hard Rock Cafe, their logo, it says Hard Rock, but then it says love all, serve all in it. because the founder of the Hard Rock was a follower of Sai Baba, the Indian guru. So he was a devotee to that. So he adds his message of love all, serve all right in the Hard Rock logo. And so that teaching of perfecting our love comes from really every tradition. It's not just found within the Christian faith or the Jewish faith or any one particular faith. It's really found in all. In fact, that idea of love is so powerful that it's also very often equated to God.
Yes.
So, for example, the Russian writer Tolstoy, he said, where love is, God is there also. And the Christian letters of St. John, which is often attributed to St. John of the Apostle, he says, let us love one another, for love is from God. And whoever loves has been born of God and knows God. But anyone who does not know love does not know God, for God is love. And all who live in love live in God, and God in them. So what is your...
That's a whole lot of God.
That is. And it sort of is showing how powerful this perfection of our love can be, because once we get to that point, we are in a way manifesting this energy that many have labeled God.
Yeah.
So what is your take on this whole idea of love?
You know, in my world, love is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And when you hear those words, it's like, yeah, right, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
But at a deeper level, when you really get into it, I don't think we quite understand the power of love and the many forms that it has.
Excellent.
Because it's more than just one version. I mean, most of us just know the selfish love.
Yeah.
And that's really all we've ever tasted. The humanistic, you do for me, I'll do for you.
Yeah, the conditional love, like
Yes.
I'll love you if.
Yeah. Most marriages are based on that.
Yes.
You know, it's a trading system.
Right.
And then they end up not hanging out after a certain amount of years because the trade becomes unbalanced.
Right, or something's they're not getting what they were needing before with that condition of, well, I'll love you if you uphold these expectations.
And some people develop a routine where they can adapt, and they make it an enjoyable trading system, but they're still trading.
Right.
You still have to keep doing for me or I won't do for you.
Yeah, it's not completely selfless.
Exactly. Whereas in this love that we're talking about, and as many facets, it's spiritual power. That's what brought me to this path.
Yes.
Is I didn't have enough of that in my life, and I still want more now, always and forever.
Right.
And why are we so afraid of it? We talk about it. It's a real great, soundbite.
Right.
But when it comes to actually experiencing it and feeling it, most of us run away from it. I know I have.
Right.
But I don't understand, why are we so afraid of that part of ourselves, which when you get a big jolt of it, you want to tell everybody about it.
Not only do you want to tell everybody about it, but you recognize that there is a dimension of love out there that actually is beyond word expression.
Yes.
Like, it can only truly be understood once you actually feel it or have the experience of this love that, again, many of the writers and the great mystics and saints actually equate to the God energy itself. And once you get a dose of that, you recognize that all the love on this planet, all the love in this physical world is beyond, not even able to touch what this spiritual love or divine love is truly about or is.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
And something that we can talk about in maybe a minute, because we won't probably be able to touch upon all of them before the break, is that in the 1960s, there was an author called C.S. Lewis, and he's actually probably most famous for, I think it was Chronicles of Narnia or one of those. But he wrote a book called The Four Loves. And he broke love up into these categories of like affection, Philia, Eros, and another word, agape.
Yes.
And so that's become quite a standard when people begin to talk about the different levels of love today. But there are actually many beyond that as well. He just chose those four Greek terms because they were often found within the scriptures and broke them down into how these levels of love can be categorized. But I think we need to take a quick break here, and we'll touch upon those and talk more about love when we come back from these messages. So stay tuned. Welcome back to Conscious Conversations. I'm Anthony Profeta, and I'm having a conversation with co-host Wes Gordon today about love. And Wes mentioned that, you said that there were many different aspects or dimensions to love, and how in our physical form or our humanness, love is also often very selfish.
Very conditional.
Yes, very conditional. And so I brought up just before the break about a author and a book that became very popular in the 60s called The Four Loves by C.S. Lewis. And what he did was he tried to categorize or break up the way love was often defined through the scriptures. And he used four basically Greek words, Greek terms in the different levels of love. Actually, he does actually mention five. He mentions one, but he doesn't really categorize it as one of the four, but he gives a brief mention to it, and that was epithumia. And they're all Greek words, and I hope I'm pronouncing them right. But epithumia actually relates to our desire or like lustful sort of physical loves, which he really didn't bring into his category of four. But the first level that he mentions is storge, which is affection, and it's one that is like a love that's brought on by familiarity, like it's a parent for a child for a parent, or your family members, or something like that, where you're very familiar with a person, and there's a sort of love that grows from that. The second one was Philia, which is a friendship love, so the bond of friendship, and that was actually considered to be a higher form of love, because we freely choose it. So like in a family relationship, you're born into it, and it's sort of just out of being in the relationship and familiar with each other, a love bubbles up from there. But in a philia form of love, it's freely given between two people, and the bond of friendship grows from that. The third level that he speaks about is Eros, which is like romantic love, sexual love. And he did mention that in that one, sometimes it could lead us astray if it does fall into the lustful, just the sexual, carnal aspect of it. But the fourth one that he mentions is one called agape.
Right.
And agape is like this divine love that is selfless, not selfish. There's no essence of selfish that runs through it at all. And it's unconditional. He actually says, the author C.S. Lewis, that agape is one that is infused into our hearts by God itself. And that's a very divine love, not what we equate to with the human love, as you were saying before.
Right. Exactly.
Are you familiar with those?
Most of the terms, yeah, especially the agape one I am.
Yeah, and that one I think is primarily the one that most people have actually heard of before. And that's a term that's used a lot in many Christian circles, the agape love.
Right.
And I believe that's because it comes from the the Greek translation of the Holy Bible itself. In the Hebrew Bible, they had different words for love, but they usually only used one word. It was ahav, H-A-A-V, and that was like a broad word that actually meant love in many different capacities. So it was love between people, it was love for family, it was love for friends, and it was love for God. It was just that. But when the translators of the Bible translated it into Greek, when it was ever love for God or God's love for man, they used the word agape to differentiate it between like this, the conditional love that you mentioned before and the unconditional love. Now, I do get asked though sometimes by people, so how can we cultivate that sort of love? How can we really perfect ourselves? And what is your idea on how we can sort of do those sort of things?
Well, that's the elusive mystery of this path, isn't it? Yes, how to cultivate more love. It's not an easy task, especially if you come up from a family or a situation where you were victimized or experienced a lot of trauma growing up.
Right.
If you didn't have a real good balance, even if you had a good balance in your household, if you didn't have, it made it even worse. But knowing what real love is, most people don't have a real version of love because they've never actually seen, especially unconditional. I've had people talk to me and say, that doesn't exist. I don't know anybody that does that.
Right.
And I couldn't argue with them because if you really go for the root of the definition, even the people that are showing you love usually have a motive.
Right.
some part of them wants to feel a certain way, so that's why they're loving. So there's an element of selfishness even in the most purest form.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's what I've heard too, is that this idea of unconditional perfected love is really idealized, and we can't really ever strive or attain it. Is something we might be able to think about, conceptually or intelligently with our minds, but they say, well, how can you really do that? I've heard people say, well, how can you love everybody? Because, there's just people that push our buttons, or, it's easy for me to love my child. I gave birth to my child, but that neighbor's kid down the block, the little terror, I don't know if I can love him. I don't know if I can love him as much as I love my own. And I get that. I totally understand that. And the thing, though, is I believe that the word love in our modern sort of concept and perspective has sort of been desecrated, because it has been identified purely with this human sort of love or romantic love, or this sort of affectionate sort of love that we need to cultivate for all people. And I believe that some people throw obstacles in their way or create blockages because they think when they hear the term love your neighbor or love all or serve all or love your enemies, that they actually think they need to generate affectionate feelings for everybody in the world. And I'm going to say now that I don't think that's truly the case. I think that is actually an impossibility to a degree, because the way I look at humanity is I look at people as notes of music. And on a piano keyboard, there are certain notes that get along very well with each other. They're called consonant notes. And then there's notes that don't get along with each other. They're called dissonant notes.
I know some of those notes.
I think we can all think of maybe a dissonant note right now just by talking about this concept. But what I'm trying to say is that Albert Einstein and all the great physicists and Nikola Tesla, they confirm that this entire world is nothing but energy. And notes on a piano are nothing but energy. They're energetic vibrations. They're frequencies. And there's certain energies of notes that get along well, and there's certain energies of notes that don't get along well. But to say that those notes love and hate each other would actually be wrong. It's just that their energies don't mix. Okay. And I believe it's the same things with people, that we're all these notes of music. And there's definitely some notes in people that they just click. They get along very well. Their energies mesh. They have common interests, and they just blend well. But then there's other people that you meet and you have really no common interests. You don't get along with them, but that just means that your energies just are dissonant with each other. It doesn't mean, though, you can't love them.
Right.
It just means that your energies aren't clicking. Just like two notes on a piano, it would say, well, to say that note and that don't, well, they hate each other, they don't get along, they don't love each other. No, that's wrong. Their energies just aren't mixing. But there is still the ability for people to cultivate love for people with whom they're dissonant with. And I believe that while it might seem unfathomable to generate affectionate feelings for every single person in the world, when we're called to love our enemies, or when we're called to love all people, all we need to ask ourselves is, if someone that we say is our enemy, or someone that we feel is not, a friend to us, is in need or in trouble, would we lend them a helping hand? Would we extend, be of service to them or help them in that way? Or would we say, oh, good, I'm glad, this is happening for them right now? And if we were saying, oh, I'm glad my enemy is in a bad spot, then we're not coming from true love. But if our enemy is in need and we extend a hand of help to them, then we can say that we're actually coming from love, even though we might not have affectionate feelings towards them. Just my perspective, just my point of view. But I think that's how we can really think about it in a way.
Well, you said cultivating too. It's like when sometimes I was requested, or this concept was brought on to me, that I should love other people. I always felt a lack in me.
Right.
I was like, well, how can you, if you don't have it, how can you give it to someone else?
Right.
So we got to go back to our inner voice, that inner tune that we have playing, that we've drowned it out with life's diversion.
Yes.
And get back in tune with ourselves, so we can fill up what we would call our love essence.
Yeah.
Knowing yourself. And then once you get some balance with that, you have abundance.
Yes.
And you realize there's more to it than just you.
Right.
And then you have something to give. Everybody I see around me out in the world today is so traumatized and empty.
Right.
They are starving to death for anything that even resembles love, much less unconditional.
Correct.
They're going for anything that has any type of love energy in it at all. And some of it's not good for it.
Right. I totally agree with you on that. I think all people are searching for love in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes when we go searching for it and seeking it in any way we can get it, and the way we're getting it is not the optimal way to get it. And I also love, you said fill it up in yourself first. And I think we'll have a show, or we'll have to have a show in the future on self-love, which I believe is very important.
Yes.
But again, this idea of the human love versus spiritual love, the other thing is that human love is seeking some sort of reward or expectation. You brought it up before, even a parent or a family member might love you, but it's in a way selfish because they want something out of that. But true love doesn't seek any reward. It gives of itself. It's completely selfless. And the great contemplative monk Thomas Merton once wrote that our job is to love others without stopping to inquire whether or not they are worthy. That is not our business. In fact, that is nobody's business. What we are asked to do is love. And I thought that's a wonderful sort of quote just to talk about that. We don't need to think, is someone worthy of this? Just give it, because that's really what we're asked to do, and cultivate it. We all have the ability to cultivate that seed and grow within us. And there's many ways from Eastern traditions to do that. There are formal heart practice meditations like loving kindness and compassion practices, forgiveness meditations, but also just dropping from the head into the heart. And living a heart-centered life is a way to do that as well.
I think that's why Christ had the two greatest commandments, and he put those in order.
Right.
The first one was love God with all your heart, body, soul, and mind, which is an inner journey for yourself to become realized of what your deeper self actually is. And then the other one was love your neighbor.
Right.
So
yes,
there's a sequence to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I also believe that by loving other people, we are loving God, because they said the kingdom of God is within everyone.
I like to say we all have sparks of God in us.
Yes. And so by loving another, we're loving that spark within them.
Yes.
But thank you for this conversation. I loved talking to you about this topic. But just remember, so try your best to live in love. It can be cultivated. Any quality can be cultivated. And it's true that our spiritual growth and our spiritual development really doesn't progress by the things that we do, but rather by the amount of love with which we do them. So love is a great factor in our spiritual growth. So we thank you for tuning in today. We hope you will join Facebook's Conscious Conversation community and add your comments there. Let us know what you think about love, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.